Out of the red clay of Alabama, where gospel floated through the fields and sorrow lived in the soil, came a man whose voice could stop the world cold. He wasn't born into fame, didn't come from a city of bright lights or big dreams. He came from Layton, a place most maps forget. But when Percy Sledge opened his mouth, time seemed to freeze. His voice wasn't smooth, it trembled, cracked, reached for heaven and fell to earth in the same breath. It sounded like every broken heart that ever lived. And when he sang "When a Man Loves a Woman," it was more than a song. It was a confession. Yet, behind the music that healed so many hearts was a business that broke his. A story of love, betrayal, and the system that fed on the very souls it sold. This is the haunting story of Percy Sledge, the man who gave the world its most beautiful heartbreak and paid the price for every note. Percy Tyrone Sledge was born on November 25, 1940, in Layton, Alabama. The South was still segregated, still bound by chains that no law had yet broken. His family worked the land, long days under the sun, backs bent, hands raw from picking cotton. But on Sundays, they dressed in their best and went to church. That's where Percy learned what the Spirit could do. In the Galilee Missionary Baptist Church, voices rose up from pain and turned into praise. He wasn't just hearing songs, he was hearing release. The cries, the shouts, the trembling faith became the foundation of everything he'd later sing. Percy didn't chase the city like so many others. He stayed. He found work at the Colbert County Hospital as an orderly, pushing stretchers, caring for the sick, humming tunes in the hallways just to keep himself awake through the long nights. But music was in his blood. On weekends, he joined a small band called the Esquires Combo. They played high school dances, juke joints, anywhere someone would let them plug in an amp. His voice was already something special, that deep gospel ache that didn't just sing the lyrics, it bled them. People didn't just clap. They stared. They whispered. That boy sounds like he's seen God and heartbreak at the same time. And in many ways, he had. The mid-1960s, a time of hope, change, and chaos. In the middle of it all, Percy Sledge had his heart shattered. The woman he loved left him, just packed up and disappeared. Years later, he'd say, "I was so hurt I couldn't work. I'd sit in the hospital and hum to myself so I wouldn't cry." That pain became the seed of something eternal. One night, at a small gig, he began to improvise a song, no written words, just pain turned into melody. Calvin Lewis played the bass. Andrew Wright followed on organ. The audience went silent. That moment would become When a Man Loves a Woman. Quinn Ivey, a local DJ and producer, was in the room. He knew instantly what he'd heard. He brought Percy into Norala Studios, a modest setup with just a few microphones and a lot of heart. Percy stepped to the mic and, in one take, gave the world its purest love song. When Atlantic Records heard it, they knew they had lightning in a bottle. In 1966, it shot to #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and R&B charts, the first gold record ever produced in the state of Alabama. But that historic success carried a secret. Out of kindness, out of friendship, or maybe guilt, Percy gave the songwriting credit to Lewis and Wright, believing his voice was payment enough. That decision would haunt him for the rest of his life. The royalties, the publishing, the real money, it all went elsewhere. Percy had the fame, but the fortune? It slipped through his fingers. And in the shadows of that triumph, the music industry smiled. When a Man Loves a Woman hit #1, Percy Sledge's life changed overnight. One week, he was pushing stretchers down a hospital hallway. The next, he was on the cover of magazines, being called the new sound of soul. The world couldn't get enough of that voice. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't polished, it was real. Record executives rushed him onto stages from Alabama to London. He toured with the greats, Wilson Pickett, Aretha Franklin, Sam and Dave, sometimes the only Southern singer on the bill who hadn't yet learned the game. He'd stand backstage, nervous, eyes closed, whispering a prayer before every show. Then the lights hit him, and the first note left his chest like a sermon. When Percy sang, he didn't just entertain, he testified. Crowds screamed, women cried, and grown men clutched their hearts. Because when that trembling voice broke through the speakers, it sounded like every sin you ever confessed and every love you ever lost. But behind the music, the industry machine was already turning. The label owned his masters, his publishing, and his touring contracts. They promised him the world, hotel rooms, flights, fine suits, but behind the glamour was debt. Every dinner, every limousine, every studio hour was recoupable, money that would one day be taken out of his share. And that share? It was smaller than he knew. Percy didn't read contracts, he trusted people. In his world, a man's word was a handshake, but in the music business, words were ink and loopholes. For every dollar his records made, he might see a dime, maybe less. But he kept singing, because what else was there? The music was the only honest thing left. On the road, he'd spend hours alone on buses, staring out windows, missing home. Letters from his family would catch up to him weeks late, his mama asking if he was eating enough, his wife wondering when he'd come back. And while the world danced to his songs, Percy was quietly breaking. The fame was sweet, but the loneliness was bitter. There were nights when he'd finish a show, walk off stage dripping sweat, and sit alone in a small dressing room. No one around. Just the echo of his own voice bouncing off the walls. He'd say later, "People thought I was living a dream, but I was just trying not to lose myself." Still, he kept going, because the audiences kept believing. He played Europe, Africa, Australia, places where the crowds didn't see him as a colored artist or a Southern boy. They just heard soul. But back in America, the struggle was different. The civil rights movement was raging. Cities burned. Churches were bombed. And here was Percy Sledge, a black man singing about love in a country still learning how to love its own people. Some promoters refused to book him in certain states. Hotels turned him away. Police followed his buses through towns like they were transporting contraband. Yet he never stopped performing. He said, "I sing love because hate already got too many songs." That resilience, that quiet defiance, made him something more than a singer. He was a symbol of survival. But survival had a cost. His marriage suffered. His finances slipped. The record label kept pressing him for more hits, but the truth is, Percy wasn't a factory, he was a soul. And when the soul gets tired, the sound begins to fade. The world heard the voice, but few ever saw the paper trail behind it. The 1960s were golden for soul music, but gold attracts vultures. The record labels were small kingdoms ruled by lawyers and radio men, each with a secret handshake and a hungry smile. Payola, the unspoken law of the land. A few dollars slipped to a DJ, a new Cadillac in a station parking lot, and suddenly a song climbed the charts. For corporate acts, payola was a shortcut to stardom. For Southern soul men like Percy Sledge, it was a locked gate. He didn't have the money, the management, or the nerve to play dirty. His only weapon was truth, that trembling, holy voice. But truth doesn't always win in a crooked game. Radio stations began changing formats. Labels merged. Executives chased the next crossover sound, smoother, safer, wider. The men who had built the foundation of soul were pushed aside for profit. Percy's name still drew crowds, but his contracts told another story. Each advance was a loan disguised as generosity. Every session musician, studio fee, hotel bill, and plane ticket came out of his royalties. The label owned everything, the masters, the publishing, the licensing. If a commercial used his song, the checks went to others first. When he asked about missing money, he'd hear the same polite answer, "We're still recouping expenses, Percy." Recouping, that word became a ghost haunting his career. No matter how many records sold, the balance never cleared. Still, he showed up to every show. Some nights, he'd play 2 or 3 sets, drive through the night, and be back in a studio by morning. All for pennies compared to what his music was earning. The system was designed that way. The executives had their mansions, the artists had applause. And while reporters wrote about the soul explosion, the very souls making it were being drained. Percy wasn't alone. Many of his peers faced the same exploitation, brilliant black artists whose songs filled the airwaves but whose pockets stayed empty. The payola scandals hit headlines, but the deeper crime never did: ownership. The question wasn't just who gets played. It was who gets paid. By the late 1970s, Percy's career slowed. The checks stopped arriving. And the IRS came knocking. Years of bad accounting, crooked management, and lost paperwork caught up with him. In 1994, he stood before a judge, humble, ashamed, but still proud. He took responsibility, even for mistakes that weren't his alone. The court ordered restitution. Percy served time in a halfway house, working days, singing at night. He told one interviewer, "It wasn't the end of me. God just sat me down to think." That humility, that grace, separated Percy from the bitterness that swallowed so many others. But make no mistake, the industry had bled him dry. Behind the smiles of executives and the flashing bulbs of photographers lay a quiet tragedy, the story of a man who gave the world his heart, only to have it trademarked by someone else. And yet, every time he stepped to a microphone, none of that mattered. The contracts couldn't touch the spirit. The lawyers couldn't own the truth. Because when Percy sang, the business stopped being business and became gospel again. The spotlight fades faster than it arrives. For Percy Sledge, the fall wasn't sudden, it was slow, quiet, and invisible to those who only saw the smiles. By the late 1970s, the radio no longer played the same songs that once stopped the world. Disco had taken over the charts. The new generation was chasing glitter, beats, and lights, not the trembling honesty of a man and his truth. Percy tried to adapt, but his heart wasn't built for trends. He didn't sing to fit in, he sang to survive. The big labels had moved on. His management rotated through strangers. Every phone call began with flattery and ended with false promises. There were nights when he'd play small lounges, half-empty auditoriums, or state fairs, and yet, he sang with the same passion as if the world was still listening. Because for Percy, it wasn't about fame anymore. It was about faith. When the crowd clapped, even if it was only 50 people, he'd smile that humble, thankful smile, the one that said, "At least somebody's still hearing me." But offstage, the weight was heavy. The IRS case still lingered, the business was merciless, and his health began to waver. Yet, just when the world seemed to forget, fate came knocking once more. In 1987, a Levi's jeans commercial aired in Britain. The ad used "When a Man Loves a Woman," the song that started it all. The response was electric. Sales skyrocketed. Teenagers who hadn't even been born when the record first hit were now singing along. The song re-entered the UK charts, climbing to number 2. Percy was suddenly being booked again, not in small town halls, but in grand European theaters. The rebirth was emotional. He said, "It felt like God pressed rewind." He toured across Europe and South Africa, where audiences treated him like royalty. Over there, they didn't see a has-been. They saw a man whose voice carried history, pain, and purity. The press called it the resurrection of Percy Sledge. But the truth is, Percy never truly went away. The world just had to catch back up to him. In 1994, he released Blue Night, his first major album in years. It wasn't about chasing hits, it was about closure. The record was raw, honest, soaked in blues and gospel. Critics loved it. The industry that once ignored him now bowed its head. Blue Night earned Percy his first Grammy nomination, a bittersweet full circle for a man who'd been robbed of recognition for decades. But what stood out most was his humility. When asked about the nomination, he smiled and said, "I never thought about awards. I just wanted the songs to outlive me." That's the essence of Percy Sledge, a man who found redemption not through revenge or wealth, but through gratitude. He often said that his voice was a gift, not a talent, that it belonged to something higher. He would end his shows by thanking the audience, the Lord, and sometimes, even his pain. "If I didn't hurt back then," he'd say, "there wouldn't be no song for you to love now." And maybe that's what redemption really is, learning to bless the very pain that tried to destroy you. Percy's second act wasn't loud, but it was pure. No scandals. No bitterness. Just a man, a microphone, and a lifetime of truth. For all the stages Percy Sledge conquered, his truest peace was found far away from them, in the quiet corners of his home, surrounded by family, faith, and forgiveness. Fame had taken him around the world, but home was always Alabama. The red dirt roads, the churches, the sound of cicadas at dusk, that was his grounding. He once said, "The lights go off, the crowds go home, and I go back to being Percy." Not the singer. Just Percy. And just Percy was a father, a husband, a man of prayer. He married twice, and between those unions came 12 children, a full house of laughter, lessons, and love. He wasn't perfect, but he was present. He tried. He showed them the power of humility, that strength isn't about how loud you can sing, but how quiet you can forgive. His children remember him not as the man who topped the charts, but as the man who read scripture at the dinner table, who still prayed before meals, who'd hum gospel hymns while washing dishes. When he wasn't touring, he'd drive around town and stop by small churches just to sit in the back pew and listen. He didn't need to be seen, he just needed to feel. Sometimes, a choir member would recognize him. "Aren't you Percy Sledge?" they'd ask, and he'd smile and nod. "I used to be," he'd say softly. "But now I'm just thankful." Those who knew him up close say he never carried resentment. Not toward the industry, not toward the men who took his credit, not even toward the system that exploited his soul. He carried peace, the kind that can't be bought or sold. That peace grew stronger after he joined the ministry later in life. He didn't preach from pulpits, he preached through living. Through example. Through gratitude. Even as age and illness began to slow him down, he'd still make time to visit hospitals, sing at local benefits, or talk with young singers who came seeking advice. His message was simple: don't sing for the money. Sing because it's your truth. In 2005, the call finally came, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Percy stood on that stage in Cleveland, gray-haired and soft-spoken, holding the trophy with both hands. His voice cracked as he thanked his family, his bandmates, his hometown, and his fans. He didn't mention the industry. He didn't need to. The silence was its own statement. That night, he told reporters, "I got more than I ever dreamed. I'm blessed. That's all I can say." It wasn't just humility, it was closure. Percy Sledge had finally found the kind of love that outlasted applause, the love of peace, of home, and of faith that never left him, even when the world did. He lived the rest of his years quietly in Baton Rouge, often visiting schools, mentoring musicians, and spending Sundays in church with the same passion he once gave the world's biggest stages. And when he sang now, it wasn't from pain anymore, it was from gratitude. Because he had already made peace with the pain that once made him famous. Every story has a final verse, and Percy Sledge's was written not in fame or fortune, but in peace. By the time the 2010s arrived, Percy had become what the old souls called seasoned. His hair silvered, his hands slower, but his spirit still burning, still alive with melody. He toured smaller venues now, not for charts, not for cameras, but for connection. For the people. He'd sing When a Man Loves a Woman to crowds who grew up with it, couples who met to it, soldiers who came home to it, families who buried loved ones to it. It was more than a song now. It was a prayer. Each note felt like a heartbeat. Each lyric a lifetime. And though his health began to fade, Percy kept performing, saying, "As long as God gives me breath, I'll give them my song." Those close to him say that even in hospitals, he'd hum the melody under his breath, that same eternal tune, like a lullaby between him and heaven. In 2014, the doctors told him the truth: cancer. A fight that no stage could prepare him for. But Percy met it with the same grace he'd carried all his life. No public statements. No spectacle. Just quiet acceptance. He spent those final months surrounded by his family, at home in Baton Rouge. The man who once sang of heartbreak now found peace in love, royal love, the kind he had given freely to the world. And on April 14, 2015, the voice that once made the world tremble went still. Percy Sledge was gone at 74. But in truth, he never really left. Because every time when a man loves a woman drifts from a jukebox, or plays at a wedding, or echoes through an old car radio, he's still there. That trembling soul, that tender heart, that voice that could break a mountain. Percy didn't just sing about love, he was love. His song was a confession and a promise, a warning and a blessing. It told men to honor their women, told lovers to feel deeply, told humanity that pain could be beautiful if you gave it purpose. That's why his legacy endures. Because Percy Sledge didn't chase trends. He chased truth. And truth, like soul, doesn't die. His music became a mirror, showing us that to love truly is to risk, to lose, to cry, to fall, and to rise again. That was the lesson of Percy Sledge. That even when the world takes advantage, when the deals go bad, when the spotlight fades, love still wins. And as his spirit rose from this earth, it carried that one line with it, the one that defined his life, his faith, his fight. When a man loves a woman, can't keep his mind on nothing else. The man who sang it, meant it. Percy Sledge's voice lives on. Not just in the vinyl grooves, not just in the archives of soul music, but in every heart that's ever loved and lost. His was the sound of truth wrapped in melody. The kind that time can't erase. So when you hear that trembling cry again, remember. It's not just a song. It's a man's life, turned into music. A man who loved a woman, and in doing so, loved the whole world.